Good day everyone and welcome to the housing portion of this presentation. William French is your housing coordinator at CDLS Washington, and his office hours are Monday to Friday from 7 a.m. till 3 p.m. You can contact him through the housing email address. Here is the process we follow for your housing entitlements. First, your posting message is cut. Second, you send your house hunting application to the admin and pay section here at CDLS Washington, who will then send it to the approving authority for signature. Do not send it to the housing section as this will delay any approval. Third, when your application has been approved, you will receive an official house hunting trip approval email from the housing section with all of your entitlements such as your rent ceiling, square footage, and rent and utility shares. 4. While you are on your house hunting trip, you will send out to the housing section the following documents: the unsigned lease, Annex C, Annex J, the accommodation size form, and finally your US banking information. 5. Your lease is then reviewed to ensure that you are within your entitlements. And 6. An email will be sent giving you the OK to sign your lease agreement and any recommendations that were found. This email will also contain the below attachments that you will sign and send back to the housing section: the request for an accountable advance or security deposit, and a CF-52 for your first month's rent. When you have found suitable accommodations while you are on your HHT, your lease will need to be reviewed to ensure that you are within your entitlements. Please ensure you do not sign your lease until it has been reviewed by the housing section. As per your HHT approval email, the housing section will require the following documents before any lease is reviewed: the actual unsigned lease with all terms and conditions on it, such as but not limited to start date, end date, rent, security deposit amounts, and any addendums and annexes to that lease. Please do not send a draft nor an application for a lease. Then we'll need the Annex C, which is the household size declaration filled out and signed by you. Then we'll need the Annex J, the request for rent and security deposit advance filled out and signed by you. And finally, we'll need the accommodation size form, the realtor square footage certification filled out by you and signed by a third party such as your landlord or realtor. This form indicates that the square footage of your accommodation is in accordance with the MFSI and that the measurements are correct. The housing section will review your lease, and if everything is good to go, you will receive another email with your recommendation and giving you the OK to sign the lease. We'll attach a CF-52 for your first month rent and a request for an accountable advance security deposit in accordance with your lease agreement. Please sign as indicated on the email and send back to the housing coordinator. Please ensure that you send your US banking information if you have not already done so with the above forms so we can deposit funds into your account. We'll also require your US banking information so we can deposit your security deposit and first month rent in accordance with your lease agreement into your US bank account. You can send a void check, a direct deposit slip, a picture, or a screenshot of your US banking information. Please make sure that your US banking information has a 9-digit routing number and that your full account number is stated. Please do not send any Canadian banking information as our banking system cannot use this type of account. The difference between Canadian and US bank accounts is that a Canadian bank account has a transit number while the US bank account has a 9-digit routing number. What happens is that CDLS Washington deals with the Bank of America, and all the funds for your rent and security deposit are sent to them. Then the Bank of America system looks at the routing number and disperses the funds to each US bank as per their routing number. If you give Canadian banking with a transit number, the Bank of America system does not know what to do with this and a reject is sent back to the cashier. This results in a delay in getting your funds to you on time. Please note that CDLS Washington will not accept any banking information written out in an email because of errors and mistakes that may be made. This will then delay any funds reaching your US bank account on time. The cashier will then have to wait for any rejections of accounts from Bank of America, and this could take anywhere from a few days to a week. Most leases in the USA will have a standard military clause. This clause may refer to US military and not a foreign military. You should talk to your realtor or landlord to see if it can be changed to Canadian or foreign military. If your landlord will not amend the lease to reflect Canadian military, they should sign the addendum to the lease that contained a military death clause, which was included in your HHT approval email. This is not a showstopper if they do not. However, this clause is there to protect you and your family in case you are posted back to Canada early. It is very strongly recommended to include a military clause in your lease. Should a landlord refuse to sign and to include a military clause, you will be liable for any rent lease liability in excess of 60 days as per CBI 208.99. Here is the square footage entitlement set out by DCBA. You must be at or below your rent ceiling and square footage to rent accommodations. Please make every effort to stay within your entitlements. For example, if your household size of 1, you will have an entitlement of 1,800 square feet, and a household size of 2 will be entitled to 2,000 square feet, and so on. Please note that if you are under your rent ceiling but above your square footage entitlement, you cannot rent this accommodation. You need to be at or below both square footage and rent ceiling. This is the accommodation size form that is required by DCBA and must be filled out by you. This form must be sent in with your unsigned lease along with Annex C and J that was sent to you in your HHT approval email. Without this form, your lease will not be reviewed. It doesn't matter whether you're going into base housing or not, everyone is required to have this form filled out and certified by a third party, landlord or realtor. You fill it out and the third party will sign it. On this form, you can leave the name of the RC table and pay level blank, and the housing section will fill it in. Please remember that you do not sign or certify this form. If you do, or if you forget to send it in, you will delay any review of your lease. When you are looking at homes online in the USA, homes are measured from outside wall to outside wall and include everything such as garages and unfinished basements. What we require are the measurements as per MFSI 10.5.05 paragraph 9, which includes all space in the home. Measurements are inside wall to inside wall. Then you exclude any unfinished basements, attics, crawl spaces, furnace, and mechanical or electrical rooms, unheated garages as per MFSI 10.5.05.9. For example, a home advertised online showing 2,300 square feet may only be 2,100 square feet once you measure as per the MFSIs. We would recommend that you secure a realtor and bring measuring tape with you on your HHT, as this will give you the most accurate measurements. Most, if not all, realtors will have an electronic measuring device. You should ask them if they do. Please note that CDLS Washington does not have the authorization to approve more square footage than your entitlement. If you feel that you require more than the allotted entitlement, you can either elect up to one household size higher, or you can put in a grievance with DCBA or on their website. You have the option to opt up one household size higher. Opting up will give you a higher rent ceiling and square footage, as well as your shelter and utility shares will increase. You just need to indicate this on your Annex C and no approval is required. If you elect up, then you cannot go over your rent ceiling and you cannot pay the difference out of pocket. If you want to pay the difference out of pocket, then you go back to your original household size and pay the difference from there. This election remains in force for the entire time that you are in the accommodation. Please remember that you can only elect up one occupant higher. For example, if you are a household size of 1, you cannot go to a household size of 3. Some people come early on their house hunting trip and their landlords would like them to sign an early lease. The approving authority can authorize up to 3 months rent in advance of your COS date. You will need to send an email justifying why you require rent in advance of your move and why you came on your HHT so early. The housing section can approve up to 1 month early. However, anything over this will need AA approval and justification. This is very important. If you are requesting rent in advance of a move, then the accommodations must be vacant for the time you are requesting rent, which will be the start date of your lease. This means that no one should be living in the house, including another tenant or property owner. If someone such as another tenant or property owner is living in the accommodations, then rent in advance of your move will not be authorized, as this will be considered double dipping by the landlord or property owner. If you get rent in advance of your move, remember that you are responsible for these accommodations and anything that might happen while you are not physically living there. Please remember that you should be trying to secure accommodations as close to your COS date as possible. If you find accommodations that are within your square footage but not within your rent ceiling, then you can request a rent ceiling increase, RCI. If you are requesting an RCI, let us know and we will send you 2 forms that will need to be filled out and sent back to us with your memo. CDLS Washington will then send your request to DCBA in Ottawa for their consideration. This process can take a few days to review your case and receive an answer from DCBA. To help your case, you really need to justify in your memo why you need this RCI, and on the forms we send you, should list at least 10 homes you looked at and send a copy of the proposed unsigned lease. A request for an RCI will not give you a higher square footage. It will only increase your rent ceiling. A rent ceiling increase request is an exceptional measure, and every attempt should be taken to try to find a home within your entitlements. Don't sign the lease until you hear back from us. If you do, then you cannot ask for a rent ceiling increase on a lease that has already been signed. While you are waiting for a decision to be rendered, our advice is to keep looking. If you find accommodations that you like and your only option is to sign a 1-year lease, then this is all you can do. Some states or cities, like New York City, may only allow a 15-month lease, while states like Florida may only allow a 1-year lease, but they can give you a 3 1-year leases. This is acceptable. Try to secure a lease until you go back to Canada. This is the termination end date on your posting message. This would be the best option, as it ensures that you and your family have a place to live until you are posted back to Canada. Securing a multi-year lease also prevents any unnecessary moves in case your 1-year lease expires and the new lease term brings you over your rent ceiling. Some leases may contain an escalation clause. This clause will increase your rent every year by either a percentage or a dollar figure. For example, if your rent ceiling is $2,000 and your first year's rent is $1,950, and that increases 3% or $60 every year on a multi-year lease, then you're going to be over your rent ceiling for year 2, there, and 4. If this is the case, then DCBA approval is required as per MFSI 10.5.08, paragraph 7. Be careful when negotiating your lease to make sure that this clause does not put you over your rent ceiling. When you send in your lease for review, the housing section will also be looking for any such clauses. Sometimes a landlord may require proof of employment and salary. If you require such a letter, then the housing section can do one up for you. If you don't need one, then please do not send in a request. Looking for a safe neighborhood? CDLS Washington does not have a list of all cities that have safe neighborhoods. What you can do though is go online, use social media, and talk to other military members who are posted there. Even call the local police department and ask about such areas that would be good for a family. You can get a good idea on where to live and areas to avoid. You want to protect yourself and your family so that you can secure a good place to live. Just don't take the word of your realtor or landlord, as they may have a stake in the property that is being rented. Do your homework. For example, here in DC, we have certain areas that you don't want to live in as crime is very high. We try to keep people away from such areas for their safety and to avoid any potential local moves. In the DC area, you want to avoid the areas in red and possibly yellow. Remember, living in the downtown area is not all that is cracked up to be. Prior to contacting the housing section, you need to have your HHT application approved and signed by your losing and gaining unit. Your gaining unit in this case for approval is CDLS Washington. Please ensure you send your HHT application to the admin and pay section here at CDLS Washington and not to the housing section, as this will delay any approvals. Once approved by the AA here at CDLS Washington, the housing section will then send your HHT approval email with everything you need to do while on your HHT, as well as all the forms you need to fill out and send back with your unsigned lease. Upon receipt of your posting message, CDLS Washington will require access to your pay. Tell your pay office to give CDLS Washington ALT PON 022. Giving access to your pay will allow us to determine your salary band for your rent ceiling as well as your shelter and utility shares. Here are a few reminders to take into consideration. The annual posting season is a very busy time of year, especially for the housing section. The housing coordinator is by himself and there are 400 plus members that he is taking care of. During the APS, there are approximately 140 people being posted out and 120 people posted in, as well as people. Here are a few reminders to take into consideration. The annual posting season is a very busy time of year, especially for the housing section. The housing coordinator is by himself and there are 400 plus members that he is taking care of. During the APS, there are approximately 140 people being posted in and out, as well as people conducting local moves and lease renewals. Please carefully read and reread the welcome book and the emails that are sent to you and follow the instructions sent out in the HHT approval email to avoid any unnecessary email traffic and to avoid any delays in your lease approval. Always communicate with your landlord and leasing company via a traceable method: email, text, pictures, screenshots. Take time to fill out the rental conditions form of the accommodations and send it to your landlord as per your lease agreement. Always do a follow-up. Look at social media groups of military spouses in the area you're posted to and even talk to the person you're replacing. The military clause that was sent in your HHT approval email is there to protect you and your family in case you are posted back early. It is strongly recommended to include it in your lease, but it is not a showstopper of any lease review. Send your HHT application to CDLS Washington for approval to admin and pay section and not to the housing section. Send your unsigned lease along with Annex C, J, and the accommodation size form to the housing section. Without all these sent together, your lease will not be approved. We require your US banking information so we can deposit funds into your US bank account. Send it before or with your unsigned lease to avoid any delays in processing your claim. Stay within your rent ceiling and square footage. Try to secure accommodations until your termination end date on your posting message. If you cannot, then try to stay below your rent ceiling so you have room to negotiate when it's time to renew your lease. Rent ceiling increase is to be requested under exceptional circumstances. It will take a few days to process. Do not ask for a rent ceiling increase prior to your HHT. Request a letter of employment only if you need one by your landlord or realtor. Finally, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact the housing coordinator.